Hello, my name is Sarah Larkin, and this video is going to discuss some of the shortcuts that can be used, including the indirect method on the Cranmer abacus. Before we start looking at the actual shortcuts or indirect method, it is important to make a few comments first. The student, before they start using these shortcuts or the indirect method, should already understand the basics of counting, adding, and subtracting. The student should understand why the shortcut is possible and the reasoning behind it. And they should not use these shortcuts as part of a memorized rote process. Let's begin by looking at the FIVE bead in regards to addition. If we want to add some beads, but we don't have that many 1 beads to add, we're going to see if a 5 bead is available to be used. If so, we're going to go ahead and move that 5 bead down towards the counting bar to add it on and compensate for the difference in what was added. Let's look at 2 examples for this particular situation. The first one is 23 plus 25. Go ahead and set 2 10s and 3 1s on the abacus. Now to add 25, I'm going to add my 2 10s, but now to add my 5 1s, instead of counting 1 at a time until I get up to 5, I'm going to go ahead and use that 5 bead. When I bring it towards the counting bar, now I've added 5 because that's its value. At that point, that was exactly what I wanted to add, and my answer is on the abacus of 48. Let's look at the second example, 425 plus 63. 4 hundreds, 2 10s, and 5 1s. In this case, I want to add 63. So in my tens column, underneath the counting bar, I only have 2 10s, excuse me. But I wanted to add 6 10s, not 2 10s. So I'm going to go up to that 5 bead, move it towards the counting bar, and now I've added 5 10s. I need 1 more down underneath to make it 6 10s. A 5 and a 1 move towards the counting bar allows me to add those 6 10s. Go ahead and add my 3 1s, and my answer should be on the abacus of 488. Let's clear that problem out and now look at the same idea with subtraction. With subtraction, if there aren't enough beads to subtract, see if that 5 bead is available to subtract. If so, we're going to move that 5 bead away and compensate for any difference that was subtracted. Our first example is 76 minus 35, so we'll set 7 10s and 6 1s. Now we want to subtract 35. So in this case, I want to subtract 3 10s, but I only have 2 10s below the counting bar. So we'll go ahead and subtract 5 10s up above it, but since I was only supposed to subtract 3, I'm going to return 2 more below it. In the ones column, I'm supposed to subtract 5, so we'll go ahead and subtract that 5 bead for an answer of 41. The second example we will do is 386 minus 72. 3 hundreds, 8 10s, and 6 1s. This time I want to subtract 72, which is 7 10s, and 2 1s. Now notice I only have 3 beads underneath the counting bar and I need to subtract 7. So we'll subtract a 5 bead in the tens column and 2 1 beads in the tens column, for a total of 7 10s. Now in the ones place, I need to subtract 2, but I only have a single bead to subtract. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 5 instead, but I was only supposed to subtract 2, so I need to return, that's 3 too many, so I'm going to return 3 in that ones column for a total of 314. Let's look at how the 10 bead can be addressed, or moving into the next column if we have to. If there aren't enough beads to add in that particular column, we're going to look to see if there's a bead available in the next column. If so, we're going to move that bead towards the counting bar and compensate for any difference. So our first example of this one is 473 plus 192. Go ahead and move up 4 hundreds, 7 tens, and 3 ones. Now I need to add 192. Notice in the hundreds column, if I need to add 1 I don't have any more, I can push up. So instead, I'm going to move the 5 bead towards the counting bar. So bringing that 5 bead in, now I've added 5 hundreds instead of 100, so I need to compensate by removing 4 of them. In the tens column, I need to add 9 tens, but I only have 2 tens to help that I can add, so I'm going to help out in that next column. Remember that 100 is really 10 tens. So when I add 1 in that next column, I've really added 10 tens. But I was supposed to add 9 tens. So I'm going to have to pull 1 away to compensate. Now I've added 9 tens instead of 10 tens. In the ones column, I need to add 2, but I only have a single one down below to add. So I'm going to go up to that 5 bead first, and I can move that in. Now I've added 5, but I was supposed to add 2. So that was 3 too many. I'm going to compensate by removing 3 of those for an answer of 665. Let's clear that one out and do one more of those. 26 plus 165. So 2 tens and 6 ones. I need to add 165. I'll go ahead and add the 100. To add the 6 tens, I'll add 5 tens up above and 1 10 down below for a total of 6 tens. But now in the ones column, I need to add 5. The 5 bead's already down, so I only have those 3 below in that column. So I'm going to help out in the next column, so that's really 10 that I'm adding, but I was only supposed to add 5. So we'll compensate by removing 5 of them for an answer of 191. Same idea, but with subtraction. Again, I'm going to look to see what I can subtract. If I need to go into the next column, I will to subtract, but then I need to compensate for any difference. So we're going to start with 82 minus 19. Go ahead and set 8 tens and 2 ones. Now I need to subtract 19. So I'm going to start by subtracting the 110. Easy enough. Now I need to subtract 9 ones, but I only have 2 ones to subtract. So what I'll do instead is I'll subtract 10, but I was supposed to subtract 9, so that was 1 too many. So I'm going to add 1 to compensate for a total of 63. Let's look at the second example. 125 minus 93. Set 100, 2 tens, and 5 ones. Now in this case, we're going to subtract 93. Notice there's only 2 tens to subtract, but I need to subtract 9 tens. So in the next column, which is the hundreds column, I'm really going to subtract 10 tens. But I was supposed to subtract 9 tens, so I need 1 10 to compensate. Gives me 3 in that column. Now in the ones, I'm supposed to subtract 3 ones. I have no ones I can move down, so I'll subtract the 5 ones, but I was only supposed to subtract 3, so I'm going to add 2 more on to compensate for an answer of 32. Last example of the 10 bead. I'm going to start with 275. With the 275, I'm supposed to subtract 184. So we'll go ahead and subtract the 100. Now I need to subtract 8 tens, but even with the 5 bead, I only have 7 total that I could subtract in the tens column. So instead we'll subtract in the hundreds column, which is really 10 tens. Remember that in this particular case, I was supposed to subtract 8 tens, but I subtracted 10 tens. So I'll return 2 back up. That's going to leave 9 in that column. Now I need to subtract, in this case, 4 ones. I don't have any ones down below to subtract, but I do have a 5 bead up above. I'll subtract 5, but that was 1 too many, so I'll return 1 back in for an answer of 91. Let's look at just a few others with higher values. Remember, anytime we can add or subtract more than we're asked to, as long as we compensate with that difference. So let's look at a few examples of when I might be able to go further just to make it easier in the long run. Remember, sometimes you're still going to add or subtract by ones until you get to what you need. But when you don't have enough there, that's when you can take the shortcuts or the indirect method. We'll start out with 57 plus 98. If I have 57 on here and I want to add 98, notice I really only have 42 down there that I could really add in the long run anyway. But I need to add 98. So I'm going to go ahead and add 100 and compensate. 100 was too many. I was supposed to add 98, but I added 100. So I'm going to take away 2 to compensate. My answer is 155. All right. In the next example, 364. And in this case, I want to add 597. Well, let's go ahead and add the 500 because I see that 5 bead in the hundreds spot. So I've added my 500. Now, for my 97, I notice that that's really, really close to 100. And there's 3 tens that I could add. There's 5 ones I could add. So I'm far from 97. So let's go ahead and add 100. But then I can subtract 3 of the ones to compensate because I know that 100 minus the 3 is really the 97. And my answer is 961. Let's clear those values out and look at a couple of subtraction problems that use the same idea. 182, and we're going to subtract 95. Now notice I only have the 82 that I set that I could subtract, but I want to subtract 95, which is more than that. So I'm going to instead go ahead and subtract the 100, but that was 5 too many. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 5 in for an answer of 87. One more example. 287 minus 49. 287. Now for this one, I want to subtract 49. And I could do this a couple of different ways, but one thing I'm going to notice is that 49 is really close to 50. And I have a 5 bead in the tens column, which is worth 50. So if I go ahead and subtract that 50, I'm only one off. And I can compensate by returning 1 because I subtracted 1 too many. My answer is 238. So that gives you an idea of some of the shortcuts you can take. Obviously, I needed to have an idea of how many extra I added or subtracted. If I don't have that concept, then I will want to go back to using that counting method. Thank you.